J.J. McCarthy is on the path to be the best quarterback in Michigan history. I'll read this whole quote here. And Chris, of course, wrote the story on it over at thewolverine.com, which you can read right now. Harbaugh says, I feel like I stand corrected from what I've been saying the last several months, which I think JJ is a once-in-a-generation quarterback. JJ has shown to be on the path to be the best quarterback in Michigan history. The statistics, I'm sure, speak to that. And the statistic that speaks to it the most is amount of successful drives. He's had 213 drives. We've scored on 130 of those drives, and 96 have been touchdowns. 34 of them have been field goals, 61%. So it's really remarkable. There's no stat that demonstrates the quality of quarterback play more than that statistic in my mind. I think going forward, JJ will be the quarterback that all future quarterbacks are compared to. So Jim kind of calling his shot there. And again, I know at least some of the statistics, the single season records, obviously the 25 touchdown passes in a single season. We'll see if that winds up, being something that JJ breaks this year, but kind of calling his shot and Harbaugh himself being one of the best quarterbacks in program history. But what do you fellas think about, the path that he's on and what it will take for him to get there?
Look, there have been a lot of really good quarterbacks at Michigan, great quarterbacks, including guys that have gone on to have success in the NFL. It's not just Tom Brady, but there was a long, long list of guys really kind of starting with Harbaugh back in the 80s and then, Michigan with a string of quarterbacks to go on and have success there. But J.J. McCarthy, I don't think we've seen anyone with the talent of him at Michigan. And now he's starting to kind of put it together consistently and actually play at this high of a level and not just kind of make a wild throw here or make a play with his legs there. Like he's doing all those things and he has the efficiency and he's just leading this team as well. It just feels like more and more it's his team almost by the week. We knew that kind of coming into the year that it was going to have more of that feel, but it just feels like that even more as you go on throughout this season. So, I think he's on the path too. It's always interesting when you try to say like who's the greatest of all time, and then you have to invoke stats or longevity. Like Bo Jackson may have been the greatest athlete of all time, but a lot of people don't consider him that because of the lack of longevity. But you could look at him and say, hey, he was when he was healthy, that sort of thing. So there's so many different criteria. Everyone has their own criteria, but I think J.J. McCarthy is right there and probably will end up being the best quarterback in Michigan history. And is Jim also planting the seed for him maybe coming back and getting some of those stats as well and accolades that could lead him towards that? I don't think that was part of why he said it, but that I had that thought where if he comes back next year, there's almost no question in my mind if things go according to plan and he comes back that he'd be not only on that path, but way, way, way further down that path as well.
Yeah. And for me, when you look at is he on the path? I think we can have that conversation for sure. As of October 16th, 2023. There's a lot of football left to be played. At the very least, maybe 6-7 games or as many as 8 games left this year. And we'll see what he decides to do in 2024. But I think his legacy and how he is remembered is going to kind of go hand in hand with what this era of Michigan football winds up being remembered as, in terms of, do you get back to the college football playoff this year? I think the next benchmark is having a playoff win. I think that's important. As remarkable as the comeback against TCU was, a big, I won't say dark mark on JJ's resume right now, but he made mistakes in that game that led them to having to make that huge of a comeback. So I think delivering on the biggest stage, and we've seen him, when your offense fundamentally changes last year, you lose Blake Corum, you have to kind of transform yourself late in the season. What he does at Ohio State, what he did in the Big Ten championship game, that's remarkable. And those are things that'll always be remembered. And you look at the way he's playing right now, he is just in complete and total command of this offense. And I know that, the way Michigan does play doesn't lend itself to, the video game type of numbers, but what he does and what he's been able to do within the confines, and I won't even say confines, it's more the framework of what they want to do. It has been remarkable. And I have no issue saying he is maybe the most purely talented in terms of complete skill set, a Michigan quarterback we've ever seen. It's probably him and Drew Henson in that category. But if JJ goes out there and just wins a playoff game and, God forbid, wins a national title, I have no issue putting him in that same conversation of not just quarterbacks, but, then he becomes what Desmond Howard was in terms of legacy, Charles Woodson was in terms of legacy. Then you start talking about him as maybe like a Mount Rushmore type of guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think he's going to be a Heisman finalist, and they're going to have opportunities. I think he's second right now or third in Heisman odds behind Michael Penix and Dylan Gabriel, the Oklahoma quarterback. So I think he's going to have a chance to do that. But I'll push back a little bit on him needing to do it in the semifinals or on the biggest stage, because when you really look back, the only guy that actually did that on the biggest stage was Brian Griese, and he obviously had a great defense. And not to take anything away from, and so does JJ, but not to take anything away from what Brian Griese did. But I don't think people are putting him up there in that category right now of greatest quarterback in Michigan history. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, they finished number 2. One time Michigan had some other great finishes as well under some of the other top quarterbacks to play here. But I think if he does like what he did a year ago, and again, it'd be even more because they're asking him to do more this year, but against Ohio State, in that big game against Penn State, in the Big Ten championship, that sort of thing, he could be right there in that conversation. And then the next level of that, because Michigan hasn't had a quarterback, really, I mean, Tom Harmon played some of it, but be a Heisman winner, in history, then you're looking at, he's up there with Woodson or whatever if he can win the Heisman. And I think that is really possible. I think people are looking at the stats too much and not realizing what he's doing, how he's already kind of in position right now. And then also that they have 2 massive games that everybody in the country will be watching in November that can really stamp him, get that stamp of approval and move him on to New York. And the Big Ten championship game as well in December. So I think he's probably going to leave here as the greatest quarterback in Michigan history. Obviously, it's subjective, but that'd be my opinion and maybe what I think would be the sort of consensus as they come out of here.
Well, the point at the end of the day is that, folks, JJ McCarthy has entered the chat and is probably firmly in that discussion right now. So we'll see what ends up happening with that.
It's funny how he's bringing this stuff up. No one's asking him any of this. Like he came into Big Ten Media Day saying, hey, he's like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in the way that he's willing to do anything for his team. I think people took that a little out of context. And then beginning of the year, he's like, oh yeah, he's, the way he's playing is, he had all these different attributes for it. Then a couple weeks ago, he started to bring in the Caleb Williams, and he's the best quarterback in the country. Last week he actually talked about Caleb Williams and said, oh, they're right there. It's those 2. And now he's saying he's the best in Michigan history. No one's asking him about this stuff to put it in historical context. And you're also talking about a guy in Jim Harbaugh who does not really like to compare, especially great to great, as he says. He doesn't even like to compare Peyton Manning to Tom Brady. I think we all know who he would have in that debate, but publicly he doesn't want to diminish anybody. Yet he's willing to do this, and he does have extreme credibility as a Michigan football historian, but also a former Michigan football quarterback. So it's funny to see and entertaining, and also he's making great points when he's bringing all this up on his own without being asked.
Well, I'll have you call your shot today then. Heisman candidacy comes around. It's time to pick who's going to that ceremony. Is he there?
Oh, yeah. Yep. I think so.
He's back.
He's back.
It's nonstop, fellas. What are you going to do? So could you hear me scream?
No,
I'm so sick of
like several $100s to the Wolverine.com swear.
I do. Spectrum can kiss my butt. So anyway, what are we talking about? Where was I?
Well, I want to know what your criteria is, or what you'd like to see to make JJ McCarthy, put him firmly in that not just the conversation, but Jim Harbaugh calls a shot. What do you need to see to feel that way?
Just more of what the same, right? He's got to do it against the elite teams, but he's proven he can, right? When he went out to Ohio State and what he did there, that elevated him among how many Michigan quarterbacks that hadn't beaten Ohio State like that on the road, right? If you look at Denard Robinson, if you look at Chad Henne, was an offer against Ohio State. So he's proven he can do it, and he's making guys look better than they are, fellas. He is really that offensive line at tackle. Those guys need to be better. And there are reasons that plays are still, and I'll give you an example, the touchdown to Colston Loveland, right? It looked like Ladarius Henderson picked up the wrong guy, and JJ scrambles out of there and makes a touchdown happen when he probably should have been sacked and hit from the blind side. So this guy has so many Harbaugh type intangibles. It is really impressive. And to me, he just has to keep on that trajectory. He's got to stay healthy, and his offensive line has to do a little bit better job there, in my opinion. But with between the running and the passing, and in this day and age, Harbaugh could move, but they never really used him as a runner, maybe occasionally on a quarterback draw. But the way they're using him in the read option, and now he's starting to get it, fellas, even better on when to keep and when to hand off. He's on the trajectory to be perhaps the best Michigan quarterback ever.
I wonder if a guy has ever went to the Heisman ceremony and only played in like 2 or 3 fourth quarters the entire season.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.